How to record a song in Presonus Studio One Pro 7. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Green, and in today's video, I'll be taking you on a journey of recording a song in Studio One.
Well, this city has my heart in lots of ways, but that Chattahoochee still runs through my veins. Some things in life don't...
I've done this video a few times before here on the channel. You're welcome to go back and watch those at your convenience. I only ask that you smash the like and subscribe buttons and be sure to watch all the way to the end of the video. Quick note, if you're interested in following along with today's video and you want to download the exact session with all the audio files in place, if you have Presonus Studio One Pro version 7, go to greenfamilymusic.com and look for the Georgia session where you can download that today. Everything in this video is on an absolute beginner level. There are more videos on my channel which will be mentioned and listed in the description of this video. If you have any questions, also feel free to drop them in the comments below. Now we're going to start with the basics of Studio One. We'll record our tracks, and then we'll be editing our recorded music using the built-in plugins within Studio One. Now let's get started. Software installation. If you're brand new to Studio One, just follow the directions given with your software purchase. You'll want to spend some time creating your Presonus account. Go to my.presonus.com and make sure your software has been activated to your account. From the products page, you can access your copy of Studio One Pro 7. Copy that unique registration key just in case you need it later. Once version 7 downloads, you'll of course want to open it up. The first time you open Studio One Pro, there will most likely be a longer load time. Do not be discouraged, this is completely normal. Studio One is scanning your system for third-party plugins and other virtual instruments you may already have installed. I've previously recorded a recommended installation video you might want to reference if you're interested. A lot of those recommendations still apply today. I do not recommend you install everything available from Presonus. I personally use Impact and Presence mainly. These two VSTs are good for drums, drum machines, keyboards, and other synthesizer sounds. Most of my music is acoustic, vocals, and traditionally recorded instruments, so your preferences may differ. I also recommend you keep your main Presonus directory off your main drive if possible. Whenever you're working on projects, I like to keep the files stored on those projects on an external SSD. So if you have a limited computer, these song projects can certainly add up over time into gigabytes in size. You should be at the home screen for Studio One at this point, and you should have all of your recommended additions installed. Click Studio One and then Studio One Installations if you want to make sure. Simply check the box next to any features you'd like installed. Look under Purchased Content if you're interested in Deep Flight 1 and Lead Architect. For this tutorial's sake, I'll be using the new VST from Presonus, Deep Flight 1, so install that one if you'd like to follow along. Also, take some time to update your Presonus profile and the artists section on the Studio One homepage. This actually helps with the metadata stored within your project's settings. Audio interface setup. Audio interfaces come in many different forms and prices. Personally, I use the Apollo Twin X from Universal Audio. But for today's video, I'll be using an older USB interface from Presonus called the AudioBox 96. It's super affordable, and I think it would be good in this tutorial to use something that is probably more similar to beginner setup than the fancy stuff. An audio interface is highly recommended for every user, not just the professionals. With an audio interface, you can plug in microphones or instruments into them, and the signal will be converted from an analog signal to a digital signal that plugs in via USB to your computer. The audio box I'm using is a 2-channel audio interface, meaning I can plug in 2 microphones at once if I'd like. There's a headphone port and outputs for speakers if needed. The other end of the box is a basic USB connection. I'll plug this in my laptop and make sure that at this point it shows up under the Setup tab in Studio One. Under Audio Device, you should see your interface listed. If you don't, be sure to download any software or drivers that are specific to your audio interface. Then relaunch Studio One. Click where it has your audio device listed to bring up some options. Under Audio Setup and Audio Device, you want to make sure that your interface is listed as the playback and recording device. For device block size, I recommend you keep these things at 512 for now. If you have the need for low latency or faster response audio, you can lower this number to 128. Just be aware, the lower your block size, the more pops and clicks you will hear in your audio, which is not good. There are workarounds for latency, so when in doubt, go with 512 if possible. Next, click the tab for processing. Under dropout protection, I recommend using at least medium, though in my setup, I usually have this on max. I'm not sure yet how the audio box will do with max, but we'll see. It's interesting to note at the bottom of the processing tab, you will see a readout of what your expected latency will be. If you want to nerd out on these settings, you can change your block size and dropout protection to see these numbers update in real time. We're done with the setup settings for now. Let's create a new session. Creating a new session. At the home page, click the plus button located on the left side of the screen. Here's where you can certainly follow along with me or just enter your own information for now. Our song for this video's sake is titled Georgia's Still on My Mind. Beneath the song title is going to ask me where I want to save all of my project files. This is very important. If in doubt, leave it at the default location. If you'd like to record to an external solid-state drive, you can do that as well. For sample rate, I'm going to record at 48 kilohertz. Resolution will be 24-bit, though you can certainly go to 32-bit if you're worried about clipping. For time base, I have it set to bars, and song length will be 4 minutes for now. It may not be visible initially, but you can scroll down to reveal features such as tempo and key signature. Our song's tempo will be 70 beats per minute. Time signature is 4/4 and will be in the key of A major. If you're looking to use templates, I've created a custom Studio One template for version 6 and 7 users called Head Start. Never waste time labeling tracks and color coding buses ever again. Head Start is available for download over at my website, greenfamilymusic.com. Once you're ready, just click OK. Session screen layout. Here's a few buttons to be aware of when it comes to recording and navigating within Studio One Pro. To start, we'll go to the bottom of the screen where we have some familiar buttons. On the far left, we have the performance metering. If you notice this spiking or have issues with your audio, this is a good thing to check. Click Performance so you can easily switch dropout protection to minimum or other settings. Next, I'd like to mention the bars section, which will let you know where you're at within the song. You might be most interested in looking at seconds instead of bars, for instance. Next, as far as the most used buttons for me are the Return to Zero button, Stop, Play, Record, and Loop. The Record button will obviously begin the recording process, but only after you've record-enabled tracks to record. We'll get to that in just a minute. The Loop function is helpful when you're rehearsing or trying to figure out different takes before you start recording. Next, we need to address some metronome settings. It's highly recommended you learn to use the metronome or click track as you record music. By default, you can enable the click track by pressing the C key on your keyboard. You'll see the metronome light up blue. Whenever it's blue, you should hear a distinct click sound whenever you press play or record. For more on the metronome, check out my previously recorded video all about mastering the click track. On the right side of the window, we have the Browse window. Most of the time, I keep this closed, but if you'd like to make use of it, you simply drag and drop files, samples, loops, and plugins onto tracks as they're needed. To close the Browse tab, just click the Browse tab at the bottom right. The Mix and Edit tabs will be useful for mixing our audio after recording, but for the most part, I keep these tabs closed. At the top of the screen, we have our cursor tools. For the most part, you'll want to stick with one on your keyboard. This is the default tool. It has multiple uses depending on where your cursor is. The split tool is perhaps my most used cursor tool. You just hit 3 on your keyboard to switch to the split tool. Again, I've made a video already on the cursor tools, so if you need more in-depth knowledge about any of these tools, take a look at the links in the description below. At the top of the screen, you should see an I for the Inspector tab. The Inspector gives you the benefits of the Mixer tab, but just one track at a time. I'll often keep the Inspector tab open at all times. You can add plugins and do many necessary edits with this tab open. Song Setup. At the top of your window, you should click Song and then Song Setup. Click the tab for Audio I/O or Inputs and Outputs so we can configure your inputs and outputs. You shouldn't have to do this with every song, but we need to make sure that our tracks are properly routed for recording. My audio box has two inputs. These are being used as mono inputs. You'll see that each M stands for mono, and I have two mono channels in the Inputs tab. Each track can be renamed if you'd like to be fancy, or just stick with Input 1, Input 2. The Outputs tab is pretty straightforward. I'm using headphones today, but the signal for my headphones should be shared with my monitor output. 9 times out of 10, the main output left and right should be outputs 1 and 2. Once everything has been configured for your system, hit apply and then OK. Recording tracks. Now we need to record. Adding a track is very easy. Simply hit the T key on your keyboard. I want to record my acoustic guitar, so I'll keep the audio tab selected and name my track Acoustic. My count is 1 since I just want one acoustic track. The color is yellow. I'm recording with one microphone, so that will be mono. For the input, I will be plugged into channel 1 of my audio interface. For the output, I will leave it at main. Now we can see on the left, we have an acoustic track, but no audio just yet. I've got my SM7B plugged into channel 1 of my audio interface. I'm using what's called a cloud lifter box that essentially adds gain to my signal. It requires phantom power, so on my audio interface, I will turn on the 48-volt phantom power, and I will turn up the gain until I get a good signal. With Record Enable turned on and the Inspector tab open, you should be able to see a signal of your instrument within the Inspector tab. I always aim for between -12 and -18 on the meter. This will be a healthy enough signal to not clip. If you don't see this sort of signal, you might need to check your cables, your routing options, and also turn up the gain knob on your audio interface. Now, if you're hearing any delay in your headphones, you might want to disable software monitoring. Just click the blue speaker icon. The audio box from Presonus has a playback knob that I can use to introduce direct monitoring instead of playback. I'll put that knob about at 50% so I can hear both my guitar and the metronome from the software. Press the space bar to test your click track volume and then play a little to see how it compares. I'll turn my metronome down by opening the Mix tab and clicking this button just above the main output fader. I found that setting the click track volume to something like -12 or -16 is plenty fine. Now you might be wondering, what is this ruler at the top of the page? This is the timeline for your session. Each number represents the measures within your music. Click anywhere in this timeline to move your playhead around. I will usually not record until the 4th measure to leave me some space. You can also click and drag within the timeline up and down to zoom in and also zoom out. Now it's finally time to play. I'll move my playhead to the start of the session and then click the record button to get started. For today, I'm just going to be recording a verse, chorus, and an ending for this song. Now we need to add my wife's vocal. She'll be singing into the same microphone I use for my acoustic. For this, it's easy to set up. Just right-click on the acoustic track and select Duplicate Track. Now we just need to rename our second acoustic track to Vocal. Make sure the Record Enable is on for the vocal track and off for the acoustic track. Now that Lana is here, I'll do a quick check for the levels. With the gain adjusted for her voice, I'll move the playhead to the start and let's hit record.
And let my bare feet wear out those fields. Well, this city has my heart in lots of ways, but that Chattahoochee still runs through my veins.
Virtual instruments. Now for some fun, let's add a virtual instrument. Open the Browse tab and select the tab for Instruments. I wanted to try out the new Deep Flight 1 instrument, so I'll drag and drop that one onto the session. As soon as you do that, there should be a new track created with the instrument already loaded. Certainly use a MIDI keyboard if you have one. I've got a video on my channel guiding you through that setup. Check the description if you need to reference that. For this song, I can probably get by with just my mouse. Deep Flight 1 definitely sounds like something from those Dune movies. With the VST open, the best place to start is the presets menu. I think for this song, I can get by with the violin mutation preset. Again, it's not ideal for this song, but for the tutorial's sake, we'll just move along. Feel free to tweak your settings just like you would any synthesizer. If I double-click anywhere within the VST's track, I can create what's called a MIDI region. MIDI regions are similar to audio tracks, but they are the canvas for us to paint our MIDI notes. Like I said earlier, I can use my mouse to add notes. I'll create notes that line up with the chord changes to the song simply just by double-clicking. You can get as complex as you'd like. You can extend notes themselves for more sustain. You can add more notes to the chords so that you get a fuller sound. Once that's good, I'll add one more VST, and that will be Impact Kit from Presonus. The Impact Kit is based on a drum machine. I'll do the same thing as Deep Flight 1. I'll find a preset I like and add a MIDI region. For this instrument, I want a stable kick drum. So I'll add some kicks to start and then some snare or clap sounds for the chorus. Here's how to add that loop region I mentioned before. Go up to the timeline and use the loop region to select any region of audio you'd like to play on a loop. With a region selected, hit the slash key on your keyboard to enable the loop. The loop region should be blue at this point. Now when we hit play, I can edit my VSTs or audio and the loop will continue to play until I hit the space bar to stop it. Remember to disable the loop region again before you start recording or playing further. Now that's all the instruments and vocals we need for now. Let's get to mixing. Mixing audio. Mixing is the process by which we take our recorded material and make them work together. This involves the use of plugins like EQ, compression, and reverb. I'll walk you through my mixing process just so you have a starting point. Just know that every voice and instrument will be a little different. To start with, let's use some EQ. With the Inspector tab open, I can easily add the Pro EQ plugin from Presonus by clicking the plus button next to Inserts. Open the Presonus folder and click Pro EQ. For the acoustic guitar, I'll typically use a low-cut filter to remove all that rumbly stuff. Then I'll take a few decibels out of the low mids and add some high end for that air quality. The vocal is actually very similar to the acoustic. I'll use a low-cut filter to remove everything below about 100 hertz or so. Then I'll use two bands to notch out the low mids and the upper mids within Lana's voice. On the top end, that'll get a slight boost as well. For those virtual instruments, usually I just want to turn down the volume so that the tracks are more similarly matched to my other tracks. Compression is an effect that limits the dynamic range of our tracks. Basically, the loud stuff gets quieter and the quiet things get louder. Feel free to use presets for now. I'll load one for the acoustic guitar and one for the female vocal. The key is to use that threshold knob to ensure that you're getting at least 3 decibels of gain reduction at the loudest portions of the song. Next, we'll add a reverb track so that each of the elements of the mix have a defined space to sit in. Click the acoustic track and go to where it says Sends listed on the Inspector tab. Click the plus button and select Add Effects Channel. Now's where we use the Mixer tab. In the Mix tab, I want all of my tracks to be sending audio to the Effects channel. On the Effects channel, I'll load the Room Reverb plugin from Presonus. I'll go with the Chamber Reverb preset, and I'll set the Mix knob to 100%. Now we just need to have every track sending to the reverb. Click and drag the acoustic guitar send across each channel. Then, as the music plays, adjust the level of each send going to that reverb. Now, the last thing we'll do for this mix is to use a limiter plugin on the main bus. Basically, all of our audio is being filtered down until it all comes out of the main outputs. You can go nuts in any of these areas. You can add EQ and compression to your entire mix if you'd like. For this song, we'll just add the limiter plugin from Presonus and manipulate the audio so that the overall level is consistently around about negative 0.5 decibels. I'll increase the input for the limiter plugin until I see the limiter in action. Then I'll bring it back a little bit. You may like the sound of a limiter, but the more limiting you do, the more harsh it will tend to sound. So be careful to not overdo it for the sake of volume. Exporting the song. So let's say you've gotten this far. Great job. When you're ready to export your audio file, there are multiple ways of going about it. For now, I'd recommend you just use the loop region to select your entire song from beginning to end. Anything inside of your loop region will be exported. Go up to Song and Export Mixdown. Give your audio file a name. Then select the format you'd like to export. The most common export is a WAV or WAV at 24-bit 48 kilohertz. Basically, this format should sound very similar to what you've already got in Studio One. WAV formats are also large file sizes. If you're looking for a smaller file size or you don't mind the quality being lessened a little bit, you can go with MP3. But I still recommend that you keep your MP3 at 48 kilohertz and 320 kilobytes per second. For export range, we'll select between the loop, then click OK. Studio One will export your song, leaving you with your very own audio file. Like I've said, there's a lot more to this. The rabbit hole only goes deeper, but I hope this has been helpful to you. Be sure to check out the other videos on this channel and visit greenfamilymusic.com to download this exact session today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.